All right, so we've got all our plans, all the data inputted. You can see we've got a free trial, light plan, standard plan, and this gives them 1 request per month for free, or they can upgrade to 4 requests or 12 requests, and these are the associated prices. Now, these requests are essentially projects, right? It's a request by them, but it's a project for you. So think of those two words as interchangeable in this use case. So what we want to do now is head to the projects table. And this is where we're going to start adding a lot of different columns because we need to manipulate data, we need to change it, we need to sync it and do a number of different things. So this might get confusing, but you're watching a video, so at any time you can just pause or rewind, or if it's too confusing, just leave a comment and I'll try and explain it, or you can contact me directly. Actually, I'll put my email below. But let's get started, and I've obviously created another version of this earlier because there are too many columns to remember. So what we want to do is add a few different ID columns, and these ID columns are what we're going to use to reference and pull in data from all of the other tables. So the first one we want here is the client ID. So when we put a client ID here from this using the row ID, then we'll get access to all of that client information when we create a relation table. But for now, let's just continue adding the columns. So now we want also a user ID. So which client created this project, which user created this project. Then we want to add the stage ID. So what stage is this project at? And this is all just referencing this information here and pulling in this data. So when we're on a project page, for example, and it's at the in progress stage, we'll be able to show this icon because we're going to create a relation. So then we move on to the design type. And I like to put all of the IDs or the fields that we're using to create the relationships at the start of the row, because if it's all the way down the end, first of all, it needs to exist first for all the other information to be accessible. And second, if you ever want to change anything on the back end, for example, update the stage ID manually, you don't have to scroll and find it. But I digress. Let's continue. So dimensions, that should be dimensions ID, excuse me. Then we want to add the format ID, and we want to add the draft feedback ID. So when they're submitting feedback, they will select from one of these options, and that associated row ID will then be inputted into this draft ID. You'll see how it works when we start building the actual interface. For now, let's continue adding the different fields. So now we want to add a relation field, and this is going to be the client. So what we're going to do is use the client ID to look through clients and select the client that we want. And we're going to then, so now is where it starts getting a little bit complicated, because the next column we want to add is the client logo. That doesn't exist yet because we haven't created it. So what we want to do is head to the client table, and we want to add here an image, which is the logo. Now that we've created this, we can head back to projects. We can click the plus column. We can create a lookup field, and we're going to look through this client row for their logo and pull it in to this table. So we can call this client logo. And in fact, we want to do client name as well. So just as a side note, when you pull in a record into another table via a relation, it doesn't know what data you want to get out of that. It just kind of brings it all over as an object. So if you want to access specific columns or fields from that row, you need to tell it that. It won't know, for example, if you want the client name, you won't be able to get it directly from this column when you're creating the interface. You'll have to create a lookup where you look through the row and you pull in the name. So client name. So you can think of this field here, this relation. Let's just quickly example. You can think of this as the client as a whole, this relation column. And then you can think of these as the specific pieces of information you want to pull from this object. I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully it does. For now, we don't need anything there though. So let's continue. So we've got the client as an object, then we're pulling out the name and we're pulling out the logo. Then we want to do the same for the user. So we want to create a relation where the user ID matches the user. Oh, we didn't create one. Okay, so I was stressing the importance before of a row ID. And actually, maybe this is a good time to show why it's important to have a row ID. So let's just say we were using the name to as the key to the lookup instead of the row ID. If I put in here my own name, and then I create a relation where this name equals the username, it will find me no problem. So you can see now it's got that information and we can access all of the information from that row. The challenge is that, what if I spelt my name wrong and there's no O on the end? Now it's still looking for this and it can't find this, so it's saying, well, there's no user. And that's the importance of using row IDs. So what we want to do here is fix my name back up, come here, add a row ID, it'll automatically jump to the front. Now, when we head here and we put in this, it doesn't find it because I haven't changed this yet. So we want to look up the row ID. So that's the importance of using row IDs, because this is uneditable. It doesn't matter what I change my name to. If I completely get rid of that, it's still going to find me. So hopefully that explains why it's important to add the row IDs. Okay, enough sidetracking. Let's get back on track. So we've added the user. Now we need to add the name. So we need a lookup and we want to find the user's name. So this is actually, I may just go back and add me as the user so you can see what we're about to do. So this is pulling in the client, the user's full name, first name and last name. The next column we want to add is, oh no, sorry, that's in the users table. Okay, so this is what I meant by jumping back and forth. So now we're going to have to jump to the users table and add some columns here so we can then pull them in via the lookup in the projects table. So what we want to do now is add a new column, and this is going to be other split text. And the text that we want to split is our name. And we want to split this text by the space that separates my first name and my last name. And we're going to call this name split. So now we've looked at my name. If this pops up, it should. So we've looked at my name and we've split it in half using the space as a kind of separator. What we want to do now is create two more columns one for my first name that pulls in just the first item in this name split, and one for my second name, which pulls in just my last name. So what we want to do here is say name first, or first name, and we want to get a single value, get the first value from this name split. So now you can see it's pulling just my first name. And we go here, get a single value, and now we want the last name from this name split. We can call this name last. So let's just do a recap. We've got my name here. It's my first name and my surname. We've split that in half using the space as the split. And then we've pulled in just the first and we've pulled in the last. Now that we've created this, we can jump back into the projects table and we can pull in those new fields that we've just created. So instead of the full name, we actually want to just pull in the user first name. And I'll change this to user or name first. It doesn't really make sense, but I'm going to stick with it. So you can see that now we're pulling in my first name. We want to do this again, but now we want to pull in the user email. So we're going to create a lookup. We're going to look through the user that is linked here, and we're going to pull in their email. So the next thing we want to do is add a relation column that is going to look up the stage ID and pull in the relevant stage. So we're going to call this stage. And what we want to do now is pull in two things from this table. And I'll just use an example again. So I'll put in the stage ID. And I may as well just leave this. I'm indecisive. Just bear with me. So we want to pull in the stage. And what we want to do is get the stage name. And this is going to be a lookup of the stage name. And we want to pull in, via lookup, the stage icon. Now the reason we have to create this relation first, instead of going here and getting the icon, is that it won't know which icon you want. But since we've created a relation and we're saying this project is in the queued stage, when we create that lookup, it knows to get the icon from the queued stage. So we can call this stage icon. Oh, cancel, of course. Lookup, so we want to get the stage icon. And the last thing we want to do is get the stage order. So we create a lookup and we're looking through this current stage and we're pulling in the stage order. Next thing we want to do is add a date field. So when did they request this project? And this is very important because if they have a certain allotted amount of requests per month, a quota, we need to know when they're placing these requests, because if they place, for example, 4 in 1 month, and that's their full quota, we need to know that they can't place any more that month. And so what we want to do is just add in a date and time field, and we're going to call this just requested. We only want the date. It'll still pull in the time, so don't worry, you're not actually getting rid of information. It'll still pull in time, but it's only going to display the date. And we can leave it as medium, and we don't really need to respect time zones. It doesn't matter per se. So we click done. Now what we want to do And this is related to the sorting order of the projects for the client and also for us. What we want to do is, let's just say this date is now. What we want to do is expand this a little bit if we can. Okay, that's not really working. Okay, so we want to convert this date into seconds. So this is the first time we're going to be using a little bit of an odd sort of column. So what we want to do is add a new column, and this is going to be called requested timestamp in seconds. We're going to select the format date option. The date that we want to format is obviously the requested date, and the format that we want is just going to be a capital X. Now, this is Luxon is basically a way to format dates into whatever you want. In this case, the format is saying we just want it in seconds. You can look at Luxon in your own time, but for now, all we need to do is convert that date of 27th of September at 10 a.m. into seconds. And we're going to use that to sort descending these projects. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but don't worry, it will make sense when we start building the interface. For now, that's what you want to do. After that, what we want to do is create a template column. And this is the first time we'll be using a template column. And this is going to be called the sort order. So we select the type as template, and it's going to be x.y, where x is equal to the stage order that we imported, and y is equal to the timestamp that we've just created. Now, what this is going to do is, when we have many, many projects, we'll be able to sort them first by the stage they're at, and then second by the timestamp. And these numbers will all be different. We'll have 5 point something, 4 point something, because of the stage order field that we're pulling in. I know this is still probably not making much sense, but it will shortly once we get into it. But let's continue. The next thing we want to do is create a cleaner version of this requested timestamp, so it's just the month and the year. We don't need to know specifically the date. So what we want to do is create a new column, and again, it's going to be the date format time column. We're going to call this, what are we going to call this? Requested month. Requested month. The date that we want to format is again just the requested date, and this time, instead of X to give us the Unix timestamp in seconds, we want to just get the month and the year. So we click done. Now you can see that it's cut off the specific day, and it's just given us the month and the year. And this is actually the column that we're going to use to see how many requests they're placing in a month, and whether or not they can place more or they need to upgrade to place more. So this is kind of just all the random information that we've added so far. Now we want to add the actual field that they're going to use to describe the project that they want. So what we want to do is just add a description, and then we want to ask them, okay, you've described the project. Do you need text to be displayed on the design? And so we're going to create a true or false, or a Boolean column. and this is going to be called design text required, if I can say it. And this is going to be a Boolean. So when they're filling out the form to submit a request, do they need design text on the design? If yes, then they can input it. If no, then obviously they don't need any text. And this is important if, for example, they want to create like a Facebook ad or something like that. What text do you want on the actual image? And so what we need to do is obviously add a new column, which is just a text column of the design text itself. So when they select, yes, I need design text, this text field will appear on their form. If it remains unchecked, it'll stay hidden because they don't need to see it if they don't need text on their image. So the next thing we want to do is add another relation field, and this is going to be the design type. So when they're filling out this form, they'll select the design type. It will send the design type ID to that column that we created earlier. And what we want to do now is just use that design type ID to look up through the design types and tell us which one they've selected. So I'll press done. And what I'll do now is I'll just go to a random design type here so you can see what I mean. When they select it, it will put in the ID here, and then you'll see here that we can now access all of the information from that particular design type. So what we want to do is, in fact, look up the name of the design type that they selected. So we can call this design type name. And then we want to add just a text field. This is going to be other design type. So if they select from the design types other, because their project doesn't fit into any of these types, so let's just say that it's other, we need to give them somewhere to write what type of design it is. So for example, if they don't want a Facebook post or an Instagram post or whatever, they want a wallpaper, they can select design type as other, and then this text field will appear where they can type in the design type. Now, what we want to do here is we're going to create another column, and it's going to be an if then else column. So if they select the other design type, then we want to show the design type as other. Else, we want to just show the name of the design type. I didn't explain that well at all. So what I'll do is just build it out and then explain it. That probably makes a little bit more sense. So what we want to do is create an if then else column, and I'm going to call this design type selector. So if the other design type is not empty, so if they've actually entered in their own design type, then we want to just show that design type. If they haven't entered anything and they've selected something else that their project fits into, then we just want to just display the design type name. So let's head to design types and let's say that it's Facebook post. Okay, so since they haven't entered anything into the custom field where they can type their own design type, it's just going to show Facebook post on the page, on the interface, let's say. However, if they selected other and they put in here wallpaper, on the interface, it's going to show wallpaper. So this is now a dynamic field that we can show on the interface that's either going to show the design type that they've selected, if it's one of the pre-selected options, or if they type something custom, it will show the custom name. And this is important because otherwise we would have to add these two fields to the interface separately, and it just causes a whole mess. Whereas now we can just add this to the interface and it will dynamically show what we want it to show. So I hope that made a little bit more sense than my explanation before. But now what we're going to do is just add a lookup column, and this is going to be the design type icon. And yep, we're going to look up the design type icon. All right. So this is the biggest table. Don't worry if it feels very long and very confusing. This is the biggest one. Once we've completed this, it does get a little bit easier. But all of this is necessary for us to build the interface. Now, bear in mind that when I initially built this app, I didn't just build out the table entirely before building the interface. It's never that linear. So what I was doing is usually, building a little bit of the table, understanding what information I need, then trying to build the interface and understanding that, oh, I need this field or I need this. So I come back and I create it. And it's a very kind of messy process, but it should be, especially when you're experimenting and you're building something completely new. It's never going to be bang, 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 unless you're following a tutorial like this. So that's a little rant for you, just to explain it. Anyhow, let's continue. And what we want to do is add a new relation field. And it's going to be, we're going to look up the dimensions ID in the dimensions table. And we're going to pull that in. So now it's pulling in nothing because there is no dimensions ID in this project. So when we add it, when they select the dimensions they want, it puts in the ID here, and then it allows us to actually pull in that information. So again, this is just pulling in the dimensions row as an object. We need to specify what from that object we want. So we're going to look up the dimensions name. Dimensions name. So we've pulled in the object and we've said, well, out of all the information we can access here, which is only two things, but out of all the information, we want this specific piece of information. And again, now we want to add a new text column called custom dimensions. So if they select the dimensions as custom, then we want to have a field, a text field, appear on their form where they can actually type in the dimensions. And then we want to do exactly what we did before. We're going to create that dimensions selector. So it's going to say, well, if they've selected a preset dimension, then we show that. If they've entered their own custom one, then we show that. So let's do that. And we're going to call this what? Dimensions selector. And this is not a template, it's an if then else. So if custom dimensions is not empty, means they've entered something, then just show whatever they've entered. If it is empty, and that means that they haven't entered any custom, then just show the dimensions name. So if they've selected landscape and they've left this blank, then it's just going to show landscape. If they've selected custom and then they've entered, 1x2, then it's going to show 1x2. So that's how that works. Then we want to add a relation field for the format. And you can see that a lot of this is just repeating, pulling in information, specifying what information we need. None of this is too complex. It just feels a little bit overwhelming because there's a lot of it, but we just add the format and we want to look up the format ID, or use that to look up the format and match it with the row ID. So we're going to jump in here and just, for example purposes, put in this format ID. And we can see now it's pulling in JPEG. So they want a landscape JPEG image, which is a wallpaper for Facebook or whatever it is. Okay, and then last thing for this format, we want to add a lookup. Again, we need to specify what information we want from this object. So we're going to call this the format name. You can see it's now text, it's not an object. So that concept should be pretty straightforward. So now we've asked them initially, obviously, what is the name of this project? Then we have asked them, or we've automatically inputted kind of when they requested it. All this other information, for example, the user and stuff, will be automatically inputted, and I'll show you that. But we've asked them what the name is. We've asked them for a description. We've asked them, do you want text on that image that we're going to create for you, or that graphic we're going to create? If yes, then we're going to show the design text field. If no, they can just leave it. Then we've asked them to select what type of design it is. We've asked them to specify the dimensions that they want. We've asked them to specify the format that they want the final product in. Now what we want to do is allow them to upload assets that can help either guide us in terms of what design they're actually looking for, like examples, or they can upload assets that they actually want us to use in the design. For example, their logo or whatever it is. So we want to add a few image fields now. And we're going to add, in fact, 6 image fields. So let's do that. This image, and this is going to be called asset 1. We're going to add another image field. This is going to be called asset 2. Asset 3 is an image field. And for this particular application, I'm just allowing them to upload 4 assets. You can add as many as you want. Just be aware it might chew into your data. Then we're going to add another image, which is going to be the draft image that you will upload and then ask them to give feedback on. And then we're going to upload the final, which is the final result, which is also an image field. So we're on the home stretch here with the projects table. We're almost done. What we want to do is just add a few more columns, and this is going to be mostly related to them providing feedback and us kind of showing and hiding certain things. So what we want to do is add a new column, and it's going to be a template column, and we're going to call this draft feedback link. Why is that? Oh, feedback, okay. So we're going to create this template column, and it's going to be called draft feedback link. Now, since we haven't published, maybe I'll explain first. When we upload the draft image and we press the button that says request feedback, it's going to send them an email automatically saying, hi, your draft is complete. Please click this link to leave some feedback. That link that they're going to click is going to be coming from this particular column. However, since we haven't actually published the application yet, we don't know what that link is. So we're going to kind of do a temporary setup first, and then we will replace that temporary setup with the actual link. So we'll just type this in, and this is going to be just link/row ID. Now what we can do is we're going to replace row ID with the actual row ID. So you can see here, if I just look here, so you can see it's got our link, and then it's automatically put in the row ID. Now what we'll do in the future is once we publish it, we'll come back and replace the word link with the actual link to the feedback link. A lot of what I'm explaining sounds very confusing. I hope it's making sense. But sometimes there's no other way to explain things other than just, off the cuff. So that's going to be the draft feedback link. The last thing we want to do here related to the draft, it's not the last thing, I don't know why I said that, but the next thing we want to do is just add the draft feedback relation. So we want to look up, using the draft feedback ID, we want to look through the feedback rows and find the row ID that matches, and we're going to pull that in. So let's just say that they're very, very happy, and we paste that here. We can see that they're happy with no feedback. However, if they did want to provide feedback, they would need a text field. So we can call this draft feedback text. So this is where they'll put in the actual feedback itself. However, if they selected happy with no feedback, this particular text field will be hidden. And if they selected any of the other options, because they say with feedback, then it will appear and they can type in their feedback into that text field. So only a few more things that we need to put in place. So when they're actually providing feedback for the project, you may want to give them the option to also upload an image, because maybe it's just easier for them to annotate an image with arrows and this and that and say, I want these changes to be made. So we're going to add another image column, and that's going to be called draft feedback image. And then what we want to do is add basically the same template we did before, but this is for the final feedback. So as a freelancer or entrepreneur, you should always be looking to get as much feedback as you can, not to necessarily implement immediate changes, but if you see common themes in the feedback, then you can adjust accordingly. And also you want to be able to share positive feedback. Social proof is huge. So whatever you're working on, this is a great way to actually pull in as much feedback as you can. So let's add the final feedback link, and my eyes are watering for no reason. Okay, let's add the final feedback link. This is going to be a template. Again, we're just going to put in a temporary chunk of information. But what we can do is replace row ID with the actual row ID of this project. Then what we want to do is have a true or false Boolean column, and this is going to be final feedback submitted, and this is going to be a Boolean field. So this is going to tell us have they or have they not submitted their final feedback. And what we want to do, and this will hide and show the text field basically. So once they've submitted the feedback, we want to mark this as true and then hide the text field and convert it into just, hide the input and convert it into just text so they can see what they've written. If they want to edit that final feedback, then they can click edit. It will uncheck that box and then it will swap it from a text field or text display to an input. So that's what it'll do. Final feedback. So we're just going to create here the actual text that they'll enter in the final feedback. In fact, this should be before this checkbox. So once they enter something in, let's just say they enter it in and they click submit, it will check this box. So it'll turn this field from an input into text. If they click edit, it will uncheck it and then it will allow them to edit it. So There's only 2 more. We're almost there. 2 more columns. And this is going to be, God, how do you spell queued? Queued count. And this is going to be an if then else. So, I should explain this. This is going to, maybe I'll again, I think I'm getting ahead of myself actually. I'm not going to explain it now. I'll explain it when we're building the interface because it's going to make a lot more sense. So for now, let's just actually build it out. So what we need to do actually before we do this is get the stage ID for the queued stage. So you want to head to stages, get the row ID, come back here and then continue creating this if then else column. So we're going to call this again QUEUET, and we're going to look. So if the stage ID is this particular ID, then we want this to be 1. If it's not, then we want it to be 0. This is not going to make any sense right now, but basically what we're going to do is it will count how many projects are in the queued status and how many projects are not in the queued status. And it will show and hide certain interface elements based on that number. So again, we want to do, I think this is processed count. And this is going to count all of the projects where the stage ID is not queued. In fact, we're going to keep it the same. We're going to say if it is, if the stage ID is this, hang on. If it's not that, then we want to say 1 and then we want to say 0. I believe that's correct. So let's just test it out. Let's go to stages and we'll come back to this project and we'll change the stage ID. And so now 1 has been processed and 0 is in the queue. My example, I think, was incorrect and that threw me off, but that's it. We're done for this projects table. I know it took a while and it's a little bit confusing, but it's going to make a lot of sense when we start actually building out the interface. So next, we've got the client and the users table. I promise it's a bit easier. So let's get on to them. If you enjoyed that video or you found it useful, then I highly suggest you subscribe and hit the bell icon because I have a ton of low-code videos and tutorials in the pipeline for you. And if you like the idea of becoming a low-code developer who can create anything their mind can imagine without code, head to loqode.com and sign up for one of our online bootcamps. See you next time.